Thanks for joining me in this video where we're going to discuss how to install, set up, and configure Canary systems to collect data out of Ignition. I wanted to review first a general architecture. And so what we're going to see is that we have simulated PLCs in the field that are going to be producing data coming into an Ignition server. That Ignition server has a VM set up called Ignition. We're going to install the Canary module to read data out of that server and to move it to another VM called Canary Historian, where we'll install and configure a Canary system to read that data. And then finally, we will go ahead and take Axiom, Canary's visualization tool, and show how we can embed that tool inside of Ignition clients. And additionally, we're going to show how you can use OPC HDA and the OPC COM module from Ignition to power native Ignition controls like EasyChart and the Spark lines from the Canary historical database. So we'll get started, and we're going to start with the installation and configuration on the Ignition server. So I'm here on the Ignition server, and I have two things to install. I'm going to install the sender service, which is how Canary communicates and uses store and forward to move data from the local source, in this case the Ignition gateway, to the remote Canary historian. I'm always going to right-click and run as administrator. And I'm really just looking for two components in this installation. I want to install the sender service and the Canary admin tool. I'll accept the terms, keep all of the defaults, and here I'm going to deselect the historian because I don't want the database to be here on the gateway. I'll keep the admin and I'll keep the logger. While that installs, we'll talk a little bit about best practices. The sender service communicates to the remote historian and it uses our store and forward technology. And so what that means is that if you would lose connectivity to the historical server, the store and forward is going to allow all of the local data to buffer to disk and then automatically backfill when the historian becomes available again. All right, so to verify that that's installed, I'll have now a Canary Labs folder and a Canary admin. When I look at the Canary admin, I'm only expecting to see the sender service show up, which is true, and not the actual historian tile. We'll see that on the other machine. Inside of the sender, I am going to do just a little bit of configuration. So I'll come down to the configuration bar and come to endpoints. I want to make sure that I turn on anonymous. That's our default connection when we set up the Ignition gateway to communicate data. I'll hit apply. And then additionally, I'll come to access. I'm going to add anonymous here. And again, I'll hit apply. Perfect. Now, if I open up my gateway and come to modules, install or upgrade a module, I'll browse to my file, and we'll hit install. If you don't have the module already, you can get it from the module showcase on inductiveautomation.com. It is free to download. Our friends at 4.0 Solutions are responsible for the build of this module, and you can see here we're on build 17 of the first version. Build 17 is a beta version, so don't be surprised if you don't find that you have a build 17 available to you. Likely you'll be on a later build when you're watching this. Okay, so if I go ahead and launch my designer, we'll take a look at the tags that are coming in. We're using MQTT Spark B to move tags to our system. Use this project. And when I look at the MQTT engine, again, this is the MQTT engine module. You won't have this by default. I do highly recommend that you give it a shot. We love MQTT Spark B. And here's the simulated data that I have coming in. So we've got a bunch of different tags running. Currently, it looks like from a previous demo, we've got history turned on for them. Let's go ahead and select all of them, and we'll edit them. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the history to no. All right, so no history is now on for these tags. When I come back over to my gateway, what we'll see is at the very bottom that there's a Canary Historian, Loggers, and Readers page. We want to go to the Loggers. No existing logger, so we'll create a new one. And this is where we'll configure our logging session. So for this, I'm going to name it Canary Demo. My sender is here local on the Ignition gateway. It is by default using the sender port 55253. I can verify that by coming to my endpoint. There it is, 55253, and that is enabled, which means I do not need username or password because we are anonymous. If I was using HTTPS, I would have to switch the port to 55254 and provide a username and password. The update rate will tell the configuration how fast it wants to scan the ignition tags. I'm going to go ahead and say I want 1 second data. So I'm going to move my scan rate to just slightly faster than 1 second. That way I'm scanning it under a second, picking up a change that might occur once a second. Then I have two options. I could historize the tags only, which means use history tags only. And if I use this option, any tag that currently has history turned on for it would automatically be grabbed and would be sent to the Canary Historian and saved under this dataset name. I want instead to create two sessions, and my first session is going to be called Canary Demo 1, and it's going to list as a tag history provider, and I'll just call it Demo 1. My historian is not local. It's going to be installed under Canary Historian. That's the name of the machine. I could also put the IP address. I don't need to create a new file. This is when I need to free up existing tag license. So I tell it to stop consuming license for certain tags, and I want it to treat the new session as the tag license model. So I can leave this enabled, disabled. Override with gateway timestamp. This allows me to choose to not follow the timestamp from the device, but instead to use the timestamp at the gateway. So ignore the timestamp coming from the PLC and use the timestamp from the gateway. This feature tells me to ignore the timestamp, the time zone at the device, and instead use the time zone at the gateway. So if I had two different devices, one say in Central Time Zone, one in Eastern Time Zone, and my gateway was in Eastern Time Zone, by selecting this, I would standardize all of my devices to use the Eastern Time Zone for timestamps. Finally, I do not need to enable logging. This is only used when I select a logging method of history tags only. And I'll save my change. We'll go back and we'll do the exact same thing for Canary Demo 2. Keep it all the same. This time I'll go with a 10-second tag scan. So I'll be monitoring these tags every 10 seconds. I'll send this to a data set called Demo 2. Update to Canary Historian and leave these disabled. Okay, so there we have Canary Demo 1, Canary Demo 2. This is the name that's going to appear as my historical tag history provider in Ignition, and it's going to write to the server Canary Historian, Demo 1 and Demo 2. Logging has been disabled on each because we're not using history tags only. Before I set that up, I need to install my historian. So I'm going to go over to Canary Historian. I've downloaded both the historian as well as the Axiom install. Axiom Core allows our visualization tool to connect to the historian. I'm going to go ahead and install both of these. Run as an administrator and always install the historian first. By default, we're going to write our historical files to the C drive, historian data. You could change this if you wanted to. All right, I'll want the admin. I do not need the mirror, and I do not need the ODBC for this install, and I do not need the logger for this install. Once this install is complete, we'll go ahead and install the Axiom core as well. All right, let's go ahead and install the core. Axiom's an HTML5 product that allows you to do trending and dashboard building and consumption all inside of a web browser. It installs and embeds very nicely into an Ignition client tool, and so I want to make sure you get a chance to see that as well. Additionally, at the end of the video, I'm going to show you another Ignition system I have running that will demonstrate how we can use OPC-COM module to read data out of this historian and bring it into EasyChart and the Sparkline charts. Wants to do a reboot. I'm going to hit OK. Actually, no, I'm going to hit cancel, and we'll do this later on off video. Okay, so both of those are now installed. If I come down, I've already got my admin tool pinned to the taskbar. If I come down, this is what I would expect to see. I have my Axiom core sitting there. I have my historian and my receiver service. So the receiver service is what will receive the data from the sender service. So from the Ignition gateway, we're going to pull data out of Ignition using the module, push it to our local sender service. This has the capability to buffer data locally, write it to disk if needed. But what it's trying to do is connect across the network to this machine's receiver service. The receiver then checks the data into the historian, and the historian will create two data sets, Demo 1 and Demo 2, as we start to move data over to it. All right, so let's go ahead and give it a shot. Bring this over so we can see it happen along with our data feed. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so I've got all my tags selected. I'm going to go ahead and just take the, let's take the, I don't know, we'll take the CA tags. Got some sites that look like, there we go. We'll take that group of tags and we'll edit them. We'll turn history on, and we're going to pick and send those to Demo 1. Important to note, all of the Ignition settings are still available to you. So Ignition is treating Canary just like it does the SQL historian. It's giving you the option just to point to a database. Ignition being database agnostic, doesn't care if you use Canary for your historical data or if you use SQL Server. And so by selecting Canary Demo 1, what I'm doing is saying any tags under this designation are going to send data to the Canary historian to the data set called Demo 1. Now, if I want it to interpolate the data using Ignition's interpolation rules, I'd leave it as the default historical scan class. If I want raw data, every single data change, evaluate on change. I can also choose deadbanding, as well as to force a rule that says update value once every 5 minutes, for instance. Canary does data updates by exception. So this is a nice feature if you want to make sure you get a new reading on, say, a Boolean that may not change, but twice a day, you might still want to get a reading, say, every 30 minutes. To do that, you would just say force a read every 30 minutes, even if this update hasn't changed. So I'll hit OK. So notice that all of the tags are now sending data. I've got one session established in my sender with 183 tags coming in. I'm not buffering any data, which tells me that it's connected to the historian without any problem. And it's giving me a sense of how many timestamp value qualities TVQs are updating per second right now. Let's take the additional tags. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll edit those tags. We'll turn history on. This time we'll pick Canary Demo 2, evaluate on change, no deadband. And we'll just say unlimited time between records. And you can see on my sender tile, 2 sessions are now engaged, and I've got a tag count that's growing. And it's growing because until it makes its first change, it's not seeing it as a tag that's coming into the system. Okay, so if we look back over to the Canary historian and look at our data sets, what we now see are 3 data sets. Our diagnostic, which is included on every system, Demo 1 and Demo 2. I've got 200 tags coming in the Demo 1. Right now the count is up to 1,306 tags coming in the Demo 2 and growing. If we look at the structure, inside of each data set is the daily file that we're writing for the historical record. So I'll have a new file for each day. And each file has a full tag list. We keep the exact same structure that you would find for this tag inside of Ignition. So if we look to the very first tag in Ignition, there's the structure. Each of the subfolders until the tag. And when we look here, same structure, edge nodes, .canary, data generation, .data generation 1, .device 1, and then there's the tag. Okay, so we've successfully moved data. We've got both data sets present. All of the tags that we've asked are there. The next piece is how do we take the data from here and show it inside of Ignition. And so to do that, we'll just go full screen. Let's do a new main window. And here on the far right side of our components, we'll find one called Canary Viewer. If we drop that on the screen, we'll find an iframe. This iframe has a couple properties, one of which is URL. And if I connect to the machine where I've installed my Axiom core, in this case it's the same as the historian, my Axiom client will now show right here. And so the Axiom client recognizes this is the first time that I've come into it. It's telling me that since the last version, there's been a workflow change. As I come in to run a new chart, it's going to run me through the tutorial and tell me how to get started. I'm going to go ahead and skip this. I'll let you go through it at your own pace. But if I want to add trends to my trend chart, here's my structure. So Canary Historian, Demo 1 or Demo 2. Inside of Demo 1, here's all of my tags. And if I'm looking for some of my gallon per minute tags, there they are. So this does function better when I give it more space. So we'll go ahead and make it a little more visible for us on this demo. There we go. And we'll just grab the first handful. All right, so we started with an hour duration on this chart, and you can see my 4 tags. just change the duration. Again, it's going to run me through all the tutorials. If we look at the last 5 minutes, there's my trends, and there's a lot of features that you can do inside of the Axiom trending tool. I highly recommend you watch the Axiom trending video that will dive more into that, but that's a great example of how you're able to do data back into an Ignition client from the Canary historian. I should make a note to you that this URL can carry a lot of information in it. There's a tutorial that will show you, chart tutorials, URL parameters, that in the URL that you're passing, you can actually load in tags, names, or groups of tags you'd like to show, duration, start times, whether it's live edge or not. And so what that means is that if we come down here, for instance, to the tags, I can put in this URL scripting. If I'm building my project, maybe I want to use Axiom as a some type of a standard trending tool. I might use it in my faceplating. So I could actually just pass the tag path through scripting to this URL on my Ignition project. Just a nice little helpful hint. And let's go ahead now, and I'll move to another Ignition instance, and I will show you how we connect with the HDA server. If I get rid of these VMs and move to my local machine, on my local machine I have an Ignition gateway that I can connect to. And on my Ignition gateway, if we look at modules, reset the trial. If we look at our modules, what we'll see is that we are running the OPC COM module. And so for tags history, I would want to create a connection, which I've already done here. I'll delete it and reconnect it. I want to create a connection to the OPC HDA provider. In this case, it's not local, it's remote. The name of the machine is Canary Historian. It discovers Canary Labs OPC HDA server.1. It's a program ID. I can name it here anything I'd like. Stick with the server name and create new historical tag provider. It's running and connected. So now when I launch my designer, as I launch my designer, do a new project. And let's build out a new window. On this window, I go ahead and drop a easy chart for this example. So we'll drop our easy chart on. Go ahead and double click to open up the customizer. We want to be on the pins tab, come into the top section, tag history pins, pick a tag path. There's all of my available historians. I'll just grab my path. First one was my gallons per minute. And I'll hit OK. And from that point, I've connected over to the OPC UA server, or HDA server rather, that's included with every Canary historian. I could do the same thing with the Sparkline chart or any other historical component for Ignition. If you have any questions at all, if you'd like to see a live demo, please reach out to info.canarylabs.com. Thank you.